Greetings. So this is my showcase video for my Frat House Scion build that I initially made in Mirage League, but I now also ported it over to Allflame League because I wanted to try and make it again and introduce the new support Merc that the Luminary Ascendancy allows for. It ended pretty well the first time when I made Mirage League, and it also ended pretty well right now. For some reason, when I set up the POBs and I compare them, I actually get the same damage, the same DPS output, although I get a bit higher defenses in this current version. Now, before I get too rambly here, I'll just do like a boss showcase to show like the power of the build. Where was I? Here. Yeah. There we go. Yeah.
The prize piece comes to join
My collection.
Do what I say.
Pain will be returned tenfold. Space aligns. Behold my collection.
I will have what I want. Death will not be an escape. Scurry. Billowing death. A cascade of pain. Stand still. Why?
Resistance will be punished. Time contorts. Scurry.
My irritation is growing. Stand still. How?
Stop resisting. Reality bends.
Okay, I need to actually pay attention.
Punishment inescapable.
Arrogant toy. Death will not be an escape. Scurry. Stand still. Unravel. Take this. A cascade of pain.
I require aid!
Exquisite.
The living toy must enjoy our contests, for it continues to play.
Okay, next I'll just show mapping showcase. Oh, that's okay. Whatever. I don't even know why I put the scarabs in. Yeah, not really gonna do anything. So this also the clear of the build is basically purely predicated on you having explodes from either annihilation support or Ascendant. If you don't have it, it's gonna feel really bad because the Spectres are quite slow at throwing, and also they have a very slow projectile speed, which means that any movement from enemies basically means that they'll dodge it. So highly mobile bosses can be really frustrating to fight. There's actually also an issue with the Merc. Like here, you can see he gets pushed into the wall. This is because the Merc is using Profane Cascade, which has a knockback effect. So that can actually be detrimental to you because it pushes the boss or the enemy away from
Exquisite.
your minions' attack. Okay. As you can see, here's the map. Sometimes they struggle a lot with stragglers because of their slow projectile speed. But yeah. Okay. All of that is pretty fast. You also have a nice hideout movement speed thanks to the way I guess it scales fast charges gained. Okay. Regardless. So that was kind of the map showcase and the boss showcase. Now for like the random part of the video, so you can just go look at the POB. Although I will note that it's probably still a bit over tuned. Like it still probably overestimates the DPS. They're very susceptible to there being more than one enemy presence because then they'll split their attention and the DPS will suffer greatly for it. So just keep that in mind. Like the DPS estimation is based on your specters just getting to stand there and just mark one guy that's standing still, which is not really the case that often. But that's just how it is. You saw the performance of the build in these short showcases, so you can make your own choice of whether or not you want to actually try the build yourself. Now, what's the build and how does it work? So the build is, of course, a Spectre build. It uses these perfect druidic specters that has this line that means that says they have 200% increased effect of flasks on them. Now, in order to utilize this line, we're using the Umbilicus Immortalis belt to give our flasks to the specters. So now we kind of need to solve which flask to use and how to gain charges enough to have them active. So first of all, which flask to use? So the current version, or like the endgame version that I'm playing, is using the Dying Sun flask. Is using Bottle of Faith. It's using a solo flask with the regenerate life crafted on it. Aurea's End for explodes, and Sin's Rebirth for Unholy Might. So the problem here with like Sin's Rebirth is kind of like the weakest link of the flasks because it doesn't actually scale from flask effect. It just gives them Holy Might so that they have a source of wither. It's kind of like I kind of have to do it with the loss of the Withering Touch imbue from Mirage League, because otherwise I don't really have a consistent way to apply Wither, and it's an incredibly strong damage multiplier. One of the goals with the Merc was to have it apply Wither, and she does do that. The problem is she's not really consistent enough to even on single targets. You won't have max stacks on her often enough. Like she'll get them up to like 15 stacks, and then they'll start falling off, and that's just not consistent enough considering how powerful of a multiplier it is. So this is why I'm using the Sin's Rebirth Flask. Alternatively, you'll be using a Diamond Flask to give you more crit, just consistently. In the POB, it does have a lot of crit, and that's predicated on you hitting a single target, because it's assuming that you have Assassin's Mark and that your Spectres have power charges when hit. They all have max power charges, which they'll get pretty quickly thanks to the Assassin's Mark's quality effect. Something that a Diamond Flask also helps with is actually clear, because the explosions have crits, but not a lot of the sources of crit chance on the build actually scale those explosions. So one would be like Bottle of Faith would scale it, but it requires the enemies to actually be on consecrated ground. The rest are like Cemetery, which is only spell crit chance, and power charges, which are only actually active on bosses, or like the base crit chance on Assassin's Mark, which is only when you actually use it on the enemies. So This is like the only way to really scale the crit on the explosions. So this is like better clear, but this is better single target. Another like couple of flasks to consider are the for Lito's signature flask. This one is garbage. Don't use it. So it basically removes all your crit damage, but it makes you get a bunch of like crit damage over time multiplier. And also gets a bunch of chance to poison. But you don't really need the chance to poison because your Spectres have 100% chance to poison in the first place. Every time I try and use this or put in PvP, or actually when I tried using it when I initially started the build, it just started doing a lot more damage when I switched to a pure crit version. So when I originally made the build in Mirage League, I actually started out as a dot build. But okay. Yeah, I started out as a dot build. But the switching to crit was much better. Second is like the new flask, the Storm Blood flask. This is also not really doing anything because you're dealing a bunch of small hits which don't apply large shocks, and you already have a source of shock in your Perfect Pain Artist, or in some sense your Mercenary, thanks to like crafting lightning damage spells on the staff. Okay. So this is the loadout of flasks. Next, like the upkeep of the flasks. This is done by getting 6 flask charges every 3 seconds on your chest implicits. This is an elevated implicit, the belt, and then anointing the Pathfinder Ascendancy from the Ascendancy, I suppose. With this and 150% increased flask effects, you will get 15 flask charges every 3 seconds, which is a very important breakpoint in order to get 100% uptime on Dying Sun. So like Dying Sun has a lot of like drawbacks, or well, drawbacks is it's just really difficult to have a consistent uptime of it because of like the large less duration and increased charges per use. But if you get a roll of 129% increased charges per use or lower, it will consume 45 charges every time you use it. With 15 flask charges every 3 seconds, it'll take 9 seconds before you've filled the flask up again. And if you get a relatively decent roll on the less duration, you can then use the Enkindling Orb to give it increased duration, but with the downside of getting no charges during effects. Since we're giving these flasks to the Spectres, this downside doesn't actually occur for us. So this just basically doubles the duration of the flask, and effectively means that you have permanent uptime on the flask as long as you have to use it yourself. So you have to keep that in mind, but that's like, it's not really an issue. It's basically an instant spell you cast from time to time to get more damage, and you mostly just have to use it on single targets. You can run, I'm running volley here. Greater volley would actually be fine and probably better. I was just unsure about how much overlap there were with all the projectiles that you get, so I was using regular volley. But if you run greater volley, you basically never have to press Dying Sun during mapping. It's only when a big enemy shows up or during a boss encounter. So yeah, that's basically that. Support Spectres. This build gets 4 support Spectres by hitting a specific breakpoint with the Congregation support. The Spectres that I used are Perfect Pain Artist, which gives Shock, Celerity, and Crit Multi. The Celerity is not really important in this version of the build because the Mercenary will give you a much stronger version of it. Perfect Warlord gives you Endurance charge generation and a bit of regen, Spectral Leader, bunch of action speed, as long as your minions are, of course, within range, which is not always the case. They like to run around. It's also, you kind of have to stand a specific distance from bosses. If you stand on top of the boss, your minions will then fan out in like a big circle around the boss to hit them from like a distance. So just stand at a distance to begin with, such that when you they teleport to you, they'll already be at the optimal distance. There's a lot of cars driving around outside. They better not be part of the recording. I'm gonna be mad. And the last one is the Perfect Forest Tiger, or Kindness Chieftain. So Perfect Forest Tiger is kind of just better. Kindness Chieftain has a higher max DPS, and is much cheaper. But Perfect Forest Tiger is just a lot more. What's it called? On average, it's just like better. So I should also mention like what the breakpoint is. So the breakpoint is getting a level 6 congregation support with 9 base specters. So I have a little graph here that shows the breakpoints for getting additional specters with congregation support based on your base number of specters. So this build is not using the Dark Monarch helmet, it's using Wraith Lord, so it's just scaling base specters. Now, the build gets up to 9 base specters, and you can see here all the highlighted fields are whenever it goes up a tick. And this extra specters tab shows you how many specters in total you get from this this row. So here at 9 specters, if you get the level 6 breakpoints, you'll get the 4 support specters. So yeah, that's basically why. And you do that with the delve mod on the gloves. Okay. Second, the Mercenary, the Cruel Mistress. So the goal with the Mistress was to get a source of curse, source of wither application, Zealotry, and Envy aura with aura scaling effects. So unfortunately, there's like a bunch of problems. I already mentioned one of them in regards to wither, that is just like it's not consistent enough, and that's even with the implicit that lets wither expire slower. So like her wither have a much longer duration than normal, and even then she's not applying them fast enough to be consistent all the time. Second is Despair. Like the curse, you can just basically ignore this one because it's not consistent on bossing. So for example, if you're fighting a boss that faces like Cirrus or even Maven, although Maven faces between 2 bodies, so that's less of a problem. But against something like Cirrus, let's say you go into the fight, you let your Mercenary apply the curse at the beginning, then you apply your Assassin's Mark yourself, and then cool, you face him for the first time, he comes back, and then he still has the Assassin's Mark on him from the first phase. Now, because he's already cursed, your Mercenary will not cast his own curse anymore, and then he'll only have Assassin's Mark on him, which is a big problem because Despair is a really big damage multiplier for the build. It's one of the few ways to actually reduce or affect enemy chaos resistance. So I've just kind of ignored it and gone with a Curse with Despair on hit with an additional curse on body armor, such that it can actually apply the curse and doesn't override the Assassin's Mark. But yeah, that's kind of the solution, which is really sad because like it's a big difference between level 1 Despair and level whatever Despair it's actually casting here. But yeah, that's just how it has to be. Other than that, it's running Zealotry and Envy. This is in conjunction with getting the 50% increased effect of non-curse auras from your skills. This is really strong because you can also scale implicits on the body armor for like 20% extra of this Narcos Auras effect, and just raw celerity effect, you get like 40%. These modifiers aren't even elevated. Just something I rolled into, and I just got lazy and didn't want to craft more. You can also see like the gear here is like absolute trash, but my Mercenary isn't even dying. Like, it's probably still tankier than my actual Spectres. You can also get like 60% increased celerity aura effect on a Crusader staff. I actually need to recraft this with dual influenced with what's it called, Warlord, because it can get Culling Strike. So that'll be really good. On nerve on head, implicit gloves. Hunter, nearby enemies have minus chaos resistance. Helmet. Now, this amulet is actually quite important because it means that the wither application from the merc actually still becomes viable, or a damage increase. So it gives like this new Plague Arachnid talisman gives you 35% increased effect of withered. But all the wither stacks you'll be applying will each grant 8% increased damage instead of the base 6% increased damage taken per wither stack. And the stronger wither stacks will take precedence over the regular lower potency versions. So you will see that the boss will go up to like 120% wither effects. Increased damage from wither when you hover over there, when you see on their boss bar. On that, it's just gas speed, and defenses. The boots defenses don't really matter. So yeah, that's a merc. And what's kind of relevant there. There's also one more thing that is relevant in regards to the merc. I mentioned that the merc doesn't really die, and that's even with Loyal Bodyguard always being active. So the first line here, where if your mercenary's life is higher than yours, you just offload 20% of the damage you take to your mercenary. Since we're running CI, this should always be active. So it's just 20% DR for you, and the mercenary still just doesn't die. So it's great. It's just really tanky. The mercenary also taunts, which is also another defensive layer. Really nice. Closing thoughts, I guess. The rest of the defenses is defenses. I guess it has a bit of regen. You get a lot of consecrated ground and other sources of increased like life regen. That you're using Zealot's Oath to convert to ES regen. You have your block capped with ES on block. You also just have the basic what's it called, energy shield recharge, that also comes into play relatively often actually because you're capped on block. It's running Flesh and Stone and Tempest Shield as like defensive auras, but it's also using the Aspect of the Crab skill, which is actually really nice. Since you're capped on block, you rarely actually get hit, and even like in what dense enemies, you'll still get like a couple of stacks of Aspect of the Crab before you get hit, which is really good. Like and also it's really strong against bossing, because at 12 stacks you get 24% additional physical damage reduction, which means you get a significant defense against the Shaper slams. Like this build can tank uber Shaper slams. I don't know how many ubers I'm supposed to put on there, but you know, the big boy version of Shaper. Yeah, so that's really good. And I think that's kind of all. Just some immunities, mitigation. Currently, I don't have a good enough stun mitigation. I'm considering switching out the Fortress Covenant for Immutable Force for actually getting some proper stun recovery. But I'll have to actually test that. But yeah, this is the current version of the build. It's performed quite nicely. I've enjoyed playing it. I'll probably try and make it again and make a yeah, improvements to it over time, depending on what new things come out. Probably won't post any videos about it though, but I'll keep playing it. Anyways, thanks for watching and have fun.